Please be seated.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Accept my apology. I had an emergency. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Members of the committee, when we suspended for the lunch break, we had completed HES 9. During the lunch break, the member for Bodden Town West informed me that the questions that he had with regard to appropriation HES 7, collection, recycling, and disposal of waste, were answered to his satisfaction and resolved. So therefore, I'd like to go back to HES 7 and let's take any remaining questions and then take the vote on that before we move on to HES 10. Are there any further questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I just want to thank the staff at the Department of Environmental Health for taking the time out to explain the numbers. We have concluded that where the real issue is, which is on page 106 of the budget statement, where one of the metrics was twice per week as per current, twice per week collection of garbage. It is now basically been determined that the garbage will be collected, I think, once per week. So, and that's one of the things. So at least it allows us to manage expectations of our constituents that garbage collection will be once a week. With that said, the only thing I want to continue on with my question is with illegal dumping. There was an incident, I think it was in North Side or East End, where someone was illegal dumping. They caught him and there was no punishment. Now, in my area of Beach Bay, this is one of the major issues where there are parcels of land where people just basically go there and just dump a lot of garbage. And this is a problem, a big problem for my area. And I would like to know what's the government policy or what the government intend to do with regards to illegal dumping. And once they catch these people, if they intend to prosecute them. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, through you. You're absolutely right. Illegal dumping and littering in general is a problem, and it is one that we have been has been a challenge over the years. When illegal dumping is detected or identified, and the department is notified or come across that site, we do an investigation and to try to determine whose property it is and then have a discussion with that. In many cases, there are abatement notices served to have the property cleaned up. But one of the things with that, how the law is currently written, it calls for the abatement notice to be served on the owner of the property, which is, again, a challenge when the owner, him or herself, did not deposit the litter on the property. So the department has been working with those property owners and having the site cleaned up and also taking measures to either prevent that in the future. So some of those sites are actually blocked off or gated or some mechanisms are put in place. Now, the other aspect to that is the whole issue of enforcement and how can it be enforced. And that, again, under the current law requires a whole long, detailed process. Now, I think when we spoke about upgrading the environmental health legislation, that would be one of the aspects that we want to improve with more ticketing, issuing on this tickets similar to the police system. I think is something that we're looking at so that it's an easier process. Right now, if this has to be processed, it requires an abatement notice going to the court and an abatement order issued and another length of time. So it does require a lot of time. And even with the police themselves who can also enforce it has been an issue.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman. I remember growing up, you used to have these signs, $500 littering, which I thought was always on the penal code. So even if someone can escape from that standpoint, I mean, if you go and you dump a pile of garbage on someone's property, that must be against the law somewhere. That should be prosecuted, fined or something. I mean, I think if someone came and dumped garbage in my yard, I need to make sure that there's some law that allow this person to be prosecuted.
Mr. Chair, through you, certainly that is law, under litter law. And we will be engaging in a new blitz of a campaign, that is to have additional signages posted throughout the island and some public education as well. So that is a program that we will roll out. I'm hoping that we can do so either later this year or early in the new year, and that would at least provide a bit of the education, because one of the things, like I mentioned earlier, is that some of the illegal dumping is done by, I guess, uncivic people is what I would say, and there's no need really for such an approach, because we provide garbage collection service. We have the 24-hour public drop-off at the landfill, and there are provisions made to at least facilitate those kind of things. So there really should be no need for littering or illegal dumping, but it does occur, and we are aware of it, and I want to proceed with being a whole lot more proactive with trying to get ticketing, or like I say, on the spot fine, because it's a whole drawn out process. The police has also have the community police beat officers, I think they're called now. So we're also working in collaboration with them. So there have been a lot of joint visits and discussions and talking to the members of the public aimed at trying to minimize all of those things.
Thank you, Mr. Director. Mr. Chairman, one of the things for any public campaign to work, and as much as we may want to educate the public, if there's no teeth in the law, naturally there has to be some level of deterrence. And if it's a situation where we need to make the legislative changes to put a fine of either 5,000 or 10,000 for illegal dumping, then that is something I think for this body that I will definitely be looking at bringing at the next sitting of the House. Thank you.
Member for Newlands.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to raise this as well because I actually had one of the constituents from Savannah come to me the other day. She was quite distressed because not only has she received notice for people illegally dumping on her property, but she's been instructed to put up fences, which is going to be quite costly, which I think is unfair to her, although she has some responsibility to make sure her property isn't being used in that manner. But have we considered implementing a reward system for individuals to report cases of illegal dumping? Because I can guarantee you the police are not going to find these individuals because they go late at night or they go at times when the police are not around. Implementing higher fines and in a reward system where the fines can count towards that reward, I think might be more effective. Because in most cases when you implement these campaigns against littering and so on, you're preaching to the choir. The offenders are not going to pay attention. They're just going to try to evade you. So that's a suggestion I would like to make, is some sort of reward system for tipping off.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to acknowledge that from the member.
Member for East End.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, let me stay in that same vein and say that I just heard the director say the problem is in enforcement is one of the challenges. Can I find out if each district does not have a public health officer assigned thereto?
Mr. Chair, until recently, I had one district officer. Fortunately, this year we now have the full complement, which is only 3. So there is one district officers assigned to the western part of the island, one in the central part, and one in the eastern part. And the eastern part, I refer from Borden Town, east and north side.
Okay. If such is the case, Mr. Chairman, I wonder why there's a need for enforcement, for additional enforcement, when those officers' responsibility is to cruise their area of responsibility and report whatever's in it.
Mr. Chair, and the member is so right. But as the member from Button Town West alluded to, the member from Newlands alluded to, that these things happen very late in the night, outside of the normal work hours. What I'd suggest is, in terms of the police, we'd have to utilize whatever camera footage or whatever we can get, if it is that much garbage, it would have to be protruding out of a truck or something and try to track people down in some manner. But we need to find a way to solve this problem, illegal dumping. We have the same thing in Lookout Gardens, and residents there complaining about it also. But I take the members' comments very seriously. It's a serious problem that we have, illegal dumping, and we need to continuously have conversations and come up with a way that we can achieve our goals in terms of finding out who the perpetrators are and ticketing them.
Mr. Chairman, with all due respect to the minister's response, Mr. Chairman, the night time are exceptions to the rule, and I can prove that, okay? People work in the day. They don't clean people's yard at night, and they don't leave it on their trucks until night. I have seen illegal dumping in the district of East End, in Northside, in Borden Town, on a regular basis all day long. I have called the department numerous times. The police and the department man has met me where I found people. I blocked them in, and they met me there, and nothing came of it. So when we talk about night, we need to be careful with that and understand those are exceptional times. They do it in the broad day, and there is no one available. I'll agree with the minister that the police need to do something about it too, because they don't patrol either. But this is being done on a regular basis wherever they are, because we have not done anything to protect our environment in that regard. Everybody now feels free to do what they want to do. And it is becoming a problem. I know in my constituency it is a problem. I complain and I complain and I complain, and nothing happens.
Mr. Chair, for the most part, I agree with the member from East End. But this is not a problem just for the department. It's a problem for the whole island, and I understand even if we put out messages in terms of trying to get more people to report these crimes, and then they report them and then nothing is happening. I just think the bottom line, we need to get more serious about dumping. And I don't think we're taking it serious enough as a country. We need to amend whatever legislations we need to. Maybe give the the community officers more powers or and to have a greater concentration, because I don't think that they on a daily basis that people are briefed that look out for dumping, and I think they need to include this into their briefings, whether it's the police or otherwise.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with the minister and much of what he said, but if we could change the law for us to protect our environment, what we're doing is taking the responsibility from someone else and make them do nothing. That's what we'll be doing. Because there are people out there now who are responsible for it. You got an officer from DEH, you got all the police officers. We have a moral responsibility to report it. But when we do and nothing happens, I agree with you. People then say they're not doing it anymore. So in that regard, I would like to think that we should change the law. Anyway, Mr. Chairman, I want to move on to a different one, and because we're not questioning here, we're expressing our
I was about to interrupt and say, can we get it back on focus with questions?
All right. I know I've been here long enough. I can see when you're moving towards the mic, Mr. Chairman, I want to know why the department is not accepting any more derelict vehicles. Scrap vehicles, I don't know what they're calling them.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the department is still accepting scrap metals and derelict, but at a reduced level. And the reason for that is, so we've not stopped completely, as has been the message communicated from my office. But it is at a reduced amount. And the reason for that simply is that it's an ongoing management of the site, and we have to keep making a secure and safe area for the vehicles, for the derelict vehicles and scrap metal. So that's basically what it is. And we're actually, as we do that, and that's what we have been doing all along, keep preparing an area. So that is the reason.
Mr. Chairman, for the benefit of my constituents who ask me, could I get an explanation as how you reduce the amount you take in?
Through you, Mr. Chair. On average, I think we do take into the site, presumably the members referring, is that maybe around 30, 40, 50, 60 a month, depends on how that goes. And it has to do, at least these are vehicles that are brought in, say, by the government. So sometimes when there are also private collections coming to the site. But basically what we're doing is trying to, for the time being, is to limit the amounts that are being directly brought in by the government itself. So yes, so there's still some coming in by the private sector. So that's how we're trying to reduce and manage it in the interim.
I appreciate you explaining that, because if 10 people come to your place in one day with 10 vehicles, are you going to say we can only take 5? But it's government intake that they grab truck going out and pick it up. Okay. What is being done about all these derelict vehicles all over the country, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chair, through you, it is a problem. And I think what we're seeing now with the number of derelict vehicles is the remnants subsequent to Hurricane Ivan, when a lot of those vehicles were brought in, and now they're at the end of their life, so to speak. Unfortunately, the owners are either abandoning the vehicles on either their own property or somebody else's property, when, as I mentioned earlier, there is no need for that, because the vehicles in the past have been accepted at the landfill. On the other side of that as well, the officers, we do tag the vehicles, and we serve abatement notices on the owners or the property owners in that case to take action. And those abatement notices typically have a time period, and if it's not enforced at that stage, regardless of the situation, normally the vehicle is removed and disposed of.
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to get into the minutiae of this and how many were picked up over the last 6 months or anything like that. But certainly, Mr. Chairman, it behoves this country to remove these vehicles because the threat they pose to human health. And for too long now, we have worn our hearts on our sleeves with this thing. And it's our friends that has a vehicle someplace and they're scrapping it. And this country is it has a multi-pronged approach of the challenges with these things. It is unsightly. It is bad for public health. Aesthetically, it is tourism. Where's my good friend? It is really bad, and I would invite the government to do something like I did when I was minister. I put it in the paper 6 weeks. You will have your vehicles removed off government property on such and such a date. And we engaged every tow truck. And they were going down to the dump to be crushed within 2 seconds. They were going from there down to the dump to be crushed. It needs to happen. Oh, I'm tough. Well, you left it out there, then you deal with the toughness. It's in the best interest of this country. The more of these little things we leave and make them fester, the worse this country is becoming. And we are going to suffer as a result, health-wise, whatever. Mr. Chairman, I see you moving forward.
Yeah, you know I'm going to ask you to dig out a question there somewhere.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I have other questions. But, Mr. Chairman, let me just move now to this thing about the once per week and tying that in with the ordering of the trucks. I suspect that we will get back to twice a week when those 4 trucks come. Now, when is that anticipated?
Mr. Chair, through you, certainly one of the things that I would need to ensure is that the service is stabilized first and foremost, because the additional trucks, as I mentioned, is certainly in the right direction. It would put me up then probably to 7 vehicles. I have 4 very reliable ones, and I think we're trying to get at least another 3 this cycle. And to run the full shift is 8 trucks, as I mentioned earlier. I will say that as soon as we have the fleet to that would be something that we would be certainly strongly considering.
I don't understand that. I asked for a time frame.
Yeah.
When is it anticipated? I haven't heard anything. I don't know if you misunderstood what I said.
Mr. Chair, what I understand is that in the ordering of these trucks, They take a couple months to come in, and should be here at least by the first quarter of 2018. And naming a month, I guess that would be March. The truck should all be here in service and everything and ready to go. And once we get them regularized and staff and complement to drive them, etc., I would say by the second quarter of 2018 we should be back up to twice weekly.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Chair.
if I may, sir, I hope, obviously, somebody has done some serious negotiations, because from the time you order that truck, it's 18 months delivery. 18 months lead time. Ask him.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, that was under a different leadership.
You can't change the manufacturers in America. I promise you that. I don't care what kind of leadership you are. Even Trump can't do that.
Mr. Chair, I have a question, sir.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I
sir.
want to know what the lead times are on the trucks in the past.
That's a fair question.
Yeah, we can get the exact information as to the last order, which was about 2013, but in the director's estimation, it was about 5 months, 6 months.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, sir.
Well, thank you. Want to endorse what the member from East End said in respect to we got to do something about it and do something drastic. But my question is in respect to going back to the illegal dumping. From a perspective of capturing individuals and penalizing them, would you say that there is anything that the public could do, or there's any bits of advice you can give the public in if they see somebody doing that? Because the reason I say so is every single one of us in this room has a smartphone. I want to know what is the process of evidence that needs to be collected, because maybe we need to start doing a publication of telling people to video camera people, get their audio, pictures, license plates, something, so we can start policing ourselves. Because I know each of us in our own neighborhoods don't like when people do that. So what my question is if a person from the community brings a video footage of somebody dumping something, is that enough for you to take action against an individual? Or if not, what is enough to take action?
Mr. Chair, through you, in terms of if somebody, I had a recent discussion as well. The police on that matter, and they did indicate that if that is the evidence, that can be presented to them to proceed with some action against the individual. So if there is photographic evidence or video evidence, the police seem like they can use that information to proceed.
Can members of the public present that to your department anonymously?
There is, we do have our customer service line, and I think the police do have a tip line, I believe it may be called, that such information can be communicated to. I want to also say that as I mentioned earlier, that the department will be expanding and sort of launching Zero Litter Cayman shortly, and all of that information will also be presented so that there will be dedicated sites and numbers and so forth for all of that information to be communicated. But yes.
Mr. Speaker, just to sum up, just to sum up my line of question, because That was my follow up. Is that okay? In respect to questioning him.
You had more questions?
Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead, please. proceed.
The timeline for that information to get up, because this is public. This is Finance Committee, and I know there's a lot of people in Cayman who's listening right now, and many news people who are waiting for stories. Is there any kind of information we can give the public now in respect to what they can do to stop this serious problem in our environment?
Mr. Chair, through you, my advice would be to stop littering and stop illegal dumping immediately. But that is really what they should be doing. And certainly if they have evidence in regards to that, like I said, the police have indicated that information can be brought to them for further action. So I think that's exactly what because it's important that individually and collectively that we all take civic pride in this country, and that for too long perhaps we need to come together with this. So I do agree, and since the police is ready to deal with that, and that's what I understand with the community police officers, and we do work with them, that is one of the first steps. So that's the public can do that right away.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
some years ago, we had serious problem in West Bay as well. And we put in the department put in a program where they had a dumping point with the huge bins. Is that still in operation? I know it's not in operation in our district, but is that in operation in any district? That did help. It helped to alleviate some of it. Mind you, for whatever reason, they found time to go and dump in Barkers rather than to go and dump in that bin that we provided. I know it stopped, and it did alleviate some of the situation that existed in Barkers. But is that program still available or not anymore?
Mr. Chair, through you, the member's right. We did actually experiment with that in West Bay in terms of having a mini drop-off there to deal with those type of wastes. But it really became a situation that got out of hand. The objective of it initially, even after the program or the container was removed, it was still an ongoing issue. So we have not expanded that to that capacity island-wide. But what we have been doing was working with the various communities, and for special projects or community-based cleanups, we provided a container for that type of service. So within the community, we can provide a container whether it's a weekend work.
Mr. Chairman.
Member for West Bay, I'm going to allow 2 more questions, and I'm going to take the vote if I can. I'd like to try to move this on. Member for East End, sorry.
Mr. Chairman, since it has been revealed about the shortage of equipment here today, are we doing any equipment rental like was done in the past? And I have one more question.
Mr. Chair, the equipment that we've been short of mostly has been the rear loading garbage trucks. We have not been doing any rental with other equipment, minimal rental of any equipment, and whatever we have rented was actually within the budget. But I do take what the minister was saying, but the big problem is with the rear loading trucks, and we don't have those readily available to rent.
Okay, because you got a new compact ton excavator, so you're okay there. That's where it was. And Mr. Chairman, I don't know who's going to answer this, but now that we are moving towards the waste management solution, what is going, since it is as I hear in the press, we're going to be capping the current landfill, Mount Trashmore. Who is going to take care? What is going to be done with the legacy?
Mr. Chair, I didn't hear all the question, especially the last word. Can you repeat, please?
I want to know how we're going to deal with the legacy of the dump.
Mr. Chair, through you, the plan with the existing Georgetown landfill is to close it, cap it and close it. They're investigating the feasibility of capturing the gas and using that as part of to generate energy as well. But going forward, it will be just capped and closed.
One more.
I understood capped, and the legacy is going to be captured, the gas, because that's your legacy. Once you cap it, what are you going to do with the legacy? That's a legacy that's been left behind. So you're going to capture it, use it for waste energy on gas turbines, is that it?
Mr. Chair, through you, they will investigate the feasibility of capturing the gas and using it to create energy as well. That's part of the work that's going to be done. The preliminary studies that were done by our consultants indicated that they did some flux box collection of the gas that was coming off, indicated that they think that there will be levels of gas that will be commercially viable, but it's something that they'll be looking at moving forward. The Department of Environmental Health has set up a number of monitoring wells around the landfill, which they will continue to monitor after the landfill has been capped as well, in terms of looking at the longer picture, the longer term
And that will be government's responsibility to deal with that. Is that part of government responsibility for the...
Yeah. Mr. Chair, through you, our position, as we've been advised and as we understand it, is that government will retain the responsibility for the continued monitoring the landfill and making sure that it is as it should be going forward.
Mr. Chair, just one quick question.
No questions, no. I'm putting this to
Mr.
vote
Chair,
right now. All those in favor of HES 7, collection, recycling, and disposal of waste, $4,102,547 in 2018, and $4,225,398 in 2019, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. The ayes have it. HES 10, Emergency Response Services, $144,100 in 2018, and $145,587 in 2019. Are there any questions? There are no questions. All those in favor of HES 10, Emergency Response Services, $144,100 in 2018, and $145,587 in 2019, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
And those against, no. The ayes have it. HE 11, Mosquito Control Services, $7,432,208 in 2018, and $7,558,200 in 2019. Are there any questions?
Yes, sir. Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Member for Newlands.
I noticed we're increasing this one by about roughly $1 million. Can we get some explanation as to what is going to make up that increase?
Mr. Chair, through you, there's a couple of factors driving the increase for mosquito control services. As we've mentioned with other outputs, there's rectifying the pay stagnation. There's also a slight increase in the funding for insecticides purchase, and they are looking to add some additional staff capacity at the department.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I just don't see that reflected in here. Maybe it's in the budget statements, but I just don't see the staffing component of that in here. Am I overlooking something?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, through you, I'm not following the question.
You said there was a component of staffing. How much of this increase is going to go towards additional staff?
Mr. Chair, through you, a large part of the increase, 0.94 and 0.73 in 2018 and 19 respectively, is to do with funding for the Oxitec program. Approximately $160,000 over both years is to do with the staff increase.
Okay. But Oxitec leads me to another question. Wouldn't we expect to see a reduction in this area if the Oxitec program is starting to have some effect?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the Oxitec program is one tool in an integrated management system that the MRCU is employing for vector control. It hasn't been deployed outside of the initial trial area in the West Bay that we were looking at, the operational trial. And we would expect that, because you have to remember too that the MRCU's remit includes the control of nuisance biting mosquitoes as well as the disease vector mosquitoes. The Oxitec program is targeted at the Aedes aegypti, which is the primary disease vector mosquito. The MRCU will still continue the control for nuisance biting mosquitoes as well. The Oxitec program does still involve some staff in terms of monitoring of the ovipots and the traps results and so on.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Member for East End.
Mr. Chairman, just a simple question. Dr. Petrie is gone. Who is running the department now? And will we have a director soon, a scientific director?
Mr. Chair, through you, the Deputy Chief Officer from our ministry, Nancy Bernard, has been the acting director in the interim while we undertake the recruitment. The post for Director of MRCU was advertised and closed, I think it was last week. So we're hoping to shortlist and interview and have a new director in place as soon as we possibly can in the new year. The job description for the Director of MRCU does include a requirement for some scientific qualifications and experience in the area of mosquito control. And so we're looking forward to having a new director in place to replace Dr. Petrie.
But don't we have a deputy there? Didn't we have a deputy for years, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chairman, through you, there is an assistant director at the department. The decision was made that in the interim, because of the needs of the organization at the time, that Ms. Bernard would go to hold the fort, so to speak, while we undertook the recruitment process.
Okay. Last question. What is the frequency of spraying for mosquitoes? I know when the last time I spoke to Dr. Petrie, he told me, let me get this right, that because the rainy season had come too early or something, it had, and over the years, they had a particular schedule because you expect the rainy season, and it had messed up his schedule, and he was trying to catch up. That was during summer, just before he left, maybe. No, before summer, because rainy season started early or something. What is the frequency now? Because every time there's a sprinkle, mosquitoes are lifting you up all over the place. It lifted me up and carried me. I don't know who else to take in.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the MRCU does monitoring of the mosquito traps on a daily basis, and based on the findings of the traps and any customer complaints that come in, they plan their operations day to day in response to the situation that they find. What Dr. Petrie would have been talking about is MRCU has used a combination of larviciding, which is a preventative method, and adulticiding once the adults. Yeah. And one of the challenges with the larviciding is that you need to get the pellets out before the rains start in order to try and catch it. The MRCU has also struggled over the last few years with some slight reductions in budget, combined with the fact that one of the main larvicides that they used previously lost its EPA label, and the replacement product that they have been sourcing costs twice as much and has double the application rate. So it's been even more expensive for them to try and use the larvicide. But the MRCU does plan their operations on a day-to-day basis in response to the conditions that they find from the trap counts and from the public complaints.
Oh, I'd just like to say that I'd like the member to report the area that these mosquitoes is lifting people up, so we can report a new industry. Mosquito tourism, maybe.
Well, all you need to do is tour. It's our side of the island that it is. Maybe you're not there often enough.
The neglected side.
If there are no questions, I put.
Actually, I'm sorry, Mr.
Go
Chairman.
ahead, member for Bontown West.
Yeah, thank you. Just out of my.
Go ahead,
Mr.
sir.
Chairman, just to my own understanding, prior to Dr. Petrie's departure, I understand there's an acting director. There was an assistant director, deputy director, who would have covered for Dr. Petrie when he would have gone on vacation or was out or whatever.
Mr. Chair, through you, the usual practice is for short-term coverage of vacations that the assistant director would cover.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, well, I understand if this is going to be a short-term assignment, wouldn't this have been a good time for the assistant director or deputy director to get the necessary experience in terms of their development and everything else in the role, as opposed to moving someone from the ministry?
Mr. Chairman, through you, the decision at the time was looking at the best interests of the organization at the time, and we do, as I outlined, we have embarked on an open application, an open competition process to identify the successor to Dr. Petrie.
Mr. Member from Savannah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an update on the effort of the GMO mosquitoes. I'm understanding that in West Bay it's not as successful as was expected.
Mr. Chairman, through you, the MRCU is currently reviewing the data that was collected as a result of the work that was done in West Bay. There were a number of factors that contributed to it not necessarily going as initially envisioned. There was a delay in terms of the commencement of the project due to judicial review that was undertaken. The ideal time to start the project or the program would have been before the rainy season. Because of the delay with the judicial review, the actual rollout was delayed into the start of the rainy season, so the release rate had to be much higher. Another problem that they encountered along the way was an issue with the production of the mosquitoes that were being released, and so they had suboptimal rates of the friendly Aedes aegypti that were being released at the time. So they're in the process of reviewing the data that was collected through the review, and we're looking forward to hearing from them once they've had that opportunity in terms of what they view the next steps and the success was.
Did I hear they were moving on to north side after West Bay, or did I dream that?
Mr. Chair, through you, it was originally envisioned that we would eventually, that MRCU would ultimately roll the friendly Aedes aegypti, the Oxitec Aedes aegypti out island-wide. At this point in time, I think that we're looking at the results from West Bay, we're looking at the funds that are available in the budget, and they're also looking at the areas of greatest need in terms of where the Aedes aegypti population are most established and most prevalent. At this point, there haven't been any firm decisions made in terms of where the next place would be after the pilot or the trial that was done in West Bay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
through you, I'd like to thank the member from Savannah. This has been a national concern, as we know, judicial review, etc. What I will undertake, because I still need to be briefed properly also on this program, I'll undertake for the ministry to include all members elected in a presentation. It is a national problem before we launch this program again after the investigations from MRCU.
Just in winding up, Mr. Chairman, I must say that I don't know what they spray or what they do within days after the flood rains, but it has been, at least in Lower Valley, very effective. Good job.
All those in favor of HES 11, Mosquito Control Services, $7,432,208 in 2018, and $7,558,200 in 2019. Standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
And those against, no. The ayes have it. HES 18, Counseling and Support Services, $3,360,318 in 2018 and $3,449,732 in 2019. Are there any questions? If there are no questions, all those in favor?
Mr. Chairman, just one quick,
Sure.
really quick question.
Sorry.
I noticed there are a lot of subheads under this HES 18. My only question is are we doing enough in terms of the demand for these types of services? Because if you listen to my budget address, you would have heard me talk about the social issues in this country and my desire to see the government do more in this area. So what are we basing the service level on? Is it just on demand? Is it based on research, reports? Just so I can have some comfort in knowing that we're doing as much as we possibly can.
Mr. Chair, thank you for, through you, thank the member from Newlands for that question and allow Director to answer.
Judith Seymour, Director, Department of Counseling Services. I believe your question was in relation to how resources were allocated. We made a request for increased staff based on the increased demand. at this point, we have had approval for one additional counselor and an additional program facilitator who would be at the Family Resource Center. Your question as to whether it is enough? Correct.
And that's where I was going with this. How many dedicated resources do you have in this area?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, at the counseling center, with the increased staff, we will have 7 counselors, and at the Family Resource Center, we would have 7 program facilitators. One of the areas that we have seen increased demand is actually in Cayman Brac, because for the past budget year, they have not had a full-time school counselor there, and the demand on our services has been significantly increased there. And so we do intend to have a greater presence in Cayman Brac with the addition of those staff.
Thank you. I'll stop short here, Mr. Chairman, because I'm about to make a statement. I know you didn't want me to do that, but you know my feelings on this. Thank you.
All those in favor of HES 18, Counseling and Support Services for $3,360,318 in 2018 and $3,449,732 in 2019, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
And those against, no. The ayes have it. HES 19, Policy Advice and Awareness Programs, $174,335 in 2018 and $183,268 in 2019. Are there any questions? Aye. There are no questions. All those in favor of HES 19, Policy Advice and Awareness Programs for $174,335 in 2018 and $183,268 in 2019, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
And those against, no. The ayes have it. HEA 2, HES 21, Environmental Services and Research, $4,918,742 in 2018 and $5,188 in 2019. Are there any questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Member for Bodden Town West.
I'm just more interested, through you, Mr. Chairman, the process with regards to the reports that once they're issued, like, first of all, how do they choose what to look at? Or is it a situation where some projects require sign off from this area? And what is the process in terms of the reports and what are done with those reports, or who ultimately decides? Because there have been some issues concerning projects not being able to move because of the environmental impact studies and different stuff. So I'm just trying to get a better understanding of that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I'd allow the Director, Department of Environment, to answer that.
Gina Ebanks Petrie, Director, Department of Environment. Through you, Mr. Chair. The reports that the Department of Environment generates in respect of coastal works applications, planning applications, or environmental impact assessments, or other types of reviews from a development perspective, are generated by the agencies themselves that consult with the Department of Environment, who's been delegated through the National Conservation Council to take those consultations on board. So, for example, the Central Planning Authority will refer applications to the Department of Environment. So will Cabinet in respect of coastal works. Other agencies will ask for our input depending on the activities that they are planning that would invoke the Section 41 consultation requirements under the National Conservation Law. So from August 2016 to August this year, we reviewed 486 applications on behalf of planning and the cabinet. We recommended 94% of those for approval. Only 6 of those were recommended, or 1.2% were recommended for EIAs. And I suppose I should just point out that neither of the major hotel developments that has been approved within that time period required an EIA.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman, I understand that there'll be some proposed changes to the National Conservation Law, and I'm just curious in terms of how the department is, I guess, preparing for these changes, or will it be a day-to-day impact in terms of what the department does?
Mr. Chair, I thank the member from, through you, from Bordentown West for the question. A bit premature, as the committee has just been, the review committee has just been set up, and should be that should be brought to caucus in a few weeks, very soon, and the department is represented in many ways on the will be represented in many ways on the committee. This is the review. To start their review. The committee to start the review.
Okay.
Yeah.
Through
You
you,
mean, just, Mr. Chairman, just follow up on that. What will be brought to caucus? The finalized review?
No, it hasn't started as yet.
So what?
Terms of reference, etc. And the committee membership, to approve the committee membership.
So, are we? The caucus is going to appoint this committee? Or?
No. The cabinet will appoint the committee.
Oh, so you're only you're only discussing it?
Yeah. Discussion.
Okay, because that confuses me. Why caucus?
It's just the way that this government runs it a little different.
And why we don't just leave that one side and say that the recommendation to cabinet will be made momentarily or whatever time, you know?
Yes.
through you, Mr. Chairman, of the 494 applications that were reviewed, how much of them were initiated at the request of the council?
Mr. Chairman, through you, none of them. The consultations come to us by virtue of the fact that Section 41 of the National Conservation Law basically requires any entity, any government entity who's taking a decision or about to approve or making an approval that could impact the environment in an adverse way to consult with the council and get their advice. That normally occurs, that consultation normally occurs within prescribed timeframes. So for the Central Planning Authority, for example, we have a 2-week turnaround period. The department meets every Tuesday morning to consider these consultation applications, and we get those out in a timely manner.
Member, please stand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I think this one would be for the minister, for the council. I don't even know if the council is represented here now. In recent newspaper articles, and if I'm wrong, just tell me I got this wrong. It appears to me like the council feels like on the issue of spear guns issuance, that cabinet should not be implementing that until they get their proposal of expansion of the protected zones approved. Am I right in that?
Mr. Chair, thank you. Through you, and I heard the member from East End quite correctly in terms of council and cabinet, etc., and the perceived resistance if the areas are not expanded, and that I have to be very careful how I answer because I am a politician, and yes, yes, and what I can say is that whatever has been recommended, I'll be working with the council to ensure that there's a balance and that the needs of the people are met in some way. I've seen the recommendation, and in my opinion, as minister, I want to see the issuances of the 174 that has been issued, where they can buy parts, etc., and other opportunities are there for other persons to get a spare gun license. I must admit that I am not the person that will just open the floodgate to anything, because I think that is dangerous in any case. But I think what is more dangerous is no opportunity. And I think through the negotiations and conversations have already started with the council. They've written to me, and we will have further discussions. But my intent is to ensure that beyond the 174, that there's additional opportunities, and my intention is to try to have it by district, the opportunities, equal opportunities by district, so that you don't have, for example, 20 applications waiting in West Bay, just picking a district, and then from the total amount that would be released, because it would have to be released by block, that not one district gets more than the other, and that each district has equal opportunity to apply for spear gun license, whether you had them or not.
Mr. Chairman, that one sort of knocked me back because
in a good way.
Because this is the districts right here, these hollow chambers. This is it. and these hallowed chambers, whether they consulted with their constituents or not, is required to make laws to govern this country. And the wishes of these hallowed halls cannot be questioned by anyone. That means the districts are represented. The majority wins. This is a democracy. And these hallowed halls, whether this one, as it was constituted in May, or it was the other one, the wishes of these hallowed halls have spoken, and no one has the right to challenge that. Only the people direct the people in here. And when statutes are made from here, that is it. No one must try to barter with them. The responsibility is cabinet to issue the regulations and the operations of how that must go. And we cannot share it up like we share up ice cream. Every human being in this country has a right, if they comply with the wishes of this parliament and cabinet's orders, which is the operation of the law, the statute that was made here. And this needs to stop. We are creatures of statutes. Whether we like it or not, the majority voted therefore.
Mr. Chair.
Are there any other questions?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, the only reason that...
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead,
Sorry.
Minister.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, not necessarily. I'm just trying to have the some fairness in the process in terms of opportunity. Fairness and opportunity by district, if there's a quota.
Okay. Member for Georgetown
Thank
Central.
you, Mr. Chair. And through you, Mr. Chair, based on what was highlighted in the news and recognized here in these chambers, that the committee is fearful of the large amount of potential influx of persons getting new license on the marine environment, and their hopes that once they get their new boundaries set up, then to address that problem, I think is within reason of that balance that needs to be created. Because though I am I guess, come from the old school and would like to see the elements of persons having the opportunity to have spare guns, and I supported the motion that changed it. That balance is a fair one that the committee has suggested. I'm happy to hear that the minister has said that there's going to be an increase to those numbers in respect to the spare guns. But can we say how long before the commission would be able to know when those boundaries would be done, so the public can know when an idea of the new license potentials will come around?
Mr. Chairman, may I? I don't
Give the
think...
minister a chance to answer the question.
Mr. Chairman, through you, I'm going to try to my best. So the licensing of spear guns is covered under Section 22 of the National Conservation Law, along with all other licensing that the council undertakes. And Section 22(1) says that the council may, upon written application, issue a license, provided that the council is satisfied that there are three things the council has to be satisfied of, and it's basically that the hunting or collecting of protected species won't be of a detriment to the survival of the species, or will significantly reduce the population of a protected species, or have an adverse effect on a protected area. The amendment that was made in the committee stage of the passage of the National Conservation Law that allowed for the purchase of new, and I'm quoting here, and replacement of parts on any and all equipment used to fulfill the purpose of the license is contained in section 22(2) of the law, where it says that a license shall specify the name of the person who is permitted to engage in the activity and a description of the activity, including, and then part of that is the allowance of this purchase. So the council has been struggling with how to reconcile these two positions, given what the Department of Environment has advised in terms of the current state of our marine resources. And this is where the dilemma is, and it's the basis of our recommendation to the minister. The minister has pointed out that he wishes to work with the council to, I think, refine that recommendation, which obviously the council, I believe, is willing to do. But I just wanted to point out that there's been no attempt on the part of the council to circumvent the statute or to ignore the statute or any of that. It is simply that the way the statute is constructed requires the council to satisfy itself of those first three obligations while issuing licenses and permits. And so I hope that that explains the situation in respect of where the council's recommendations have been derived from. In terms of the marine parks, there's been no attempt for a quid pro quo. What the council has said is that the recommendations that have been put forward by the council in respect of the enhanced system of marine parks would be one way of mitigating the impact of essentially opening up a licensing scheme for spear guns, thereby allowing the council to be satisfied of the three criteria that I mentioned at first in respect of no impact on the protected species, protected areas, etc. So I hope that explains the situation. In terms of the timing is completely in the hands of Cabinet. The council has made its recommendations to Cabinet in respect of what we believe ought to happen for the expansion of the marine protected areas, and it is now a matter for Cabinet to decide. So that timing is not in our hands.
Mr. Chairman, just quickly. Mr. Chairman, during the last administration, I gave the then minister, yeah, I should be able to see clearly now, he gone, pardon. I gave him a commitment publicly that I would support him bringing a motion here to take monies out of the environmental fund for the protection of our environment, especially the marine side of it, because we have, pardon me, we have suffered for years from the lack of enforcement. And I believe strongly that the environmental fund is for that specific purpose, one of the specific purposes, to protect it. And I'm going to give that commitment to this minister as well, that I am going to support. At the time, we were talking about $2 million a year or something like that to take out to ensure that our marine environment is protected by virtue of increasing enforcement officers, police, whatever the case may be. That is essential to us. The director of the environment has just said that it wasn't to circumvent the law and what have you, but it certainly gave the impression that the council was trying to barter with a statute as to whether if we get this, you can do this. The law is very specific. Cabinet can say how licenses are issued, and then the council has the right to look at it and say, well, it's going to affect there, it's going to affect there, and cabinet still must have the veto power over that council on behalf of this parliament and the people, because cabinet is enabled by this parliament. That's why it's only 2/5 out of it that go in the executive, so the other 3/5 can stop them. That's what parliament is about.
Mr. Chair, through you, Mr. Chair, I just want to understand that based on my nuances, that the more senior member to me just highlighted that in the event that the council does not get what it hopes to accomplish to fit their mandate, that cabinet can override that decision and move forward in allowing the process. And maybe the council can tell me what the position is if they don't get that, what their recommendations or control can be, because it's something that we need to address now. I mean, the cat is out of the bag, so to speak, of where the problem is, and I think this is the place to clarify it.
Mr. Chairman, through you, in response to the question as to whether Cabinet can direct the Council's, Section 49 of the National Conservation Law says that the Cabinet may give to the Council in writing such general directions as appear to the Cabinet to be necessary, having regard to the provisions of the law, the conventions, and the public interest, and the Council shall act in accordance with those directions. So the answer is that the Cabinet can direct the Council under Section 49 of the law.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Mr. Chairman?
Oh. Go ahead, sir.
I was out a minute and I didn't get to hear all of the discussion, but I've listened to a long time, even you who've only been here going in your second term, about these licenses for spare guns. And while I have been supportive of various amendments coming in, I've always felt that it is better that there is ability to ensure that these licenses are not given all over the place, because we know what will happen. I mean, if anyone in this house, any member, believes that there are not people out there that will go the opposite way, that we don't want, and destroy what we have built up as far as the marine, let's say fish, might be just turtle too, you never know. So that we have to be very, very careful in what we do. And as I said, I didn't hear how it's going to be handled, and I didn't get a chance to talk to the new minister about it as yet. But I certainly believe that we need to handle this. I was Minister of Environment for one time, and there's nobody that took any more licks about doing anything in the environment than McKeever Bush. But I ensured that we had some protection for conch, for lobsters, and groupers and everything else. We don't want to destroy that by giving out licenses all over the place, as I would put it.
And,
Minister, you have a comment or a question? Comment?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And we all have to have restraint
Right.
on this. And yes, I am a supporter of opportunity in persons getting license, but at the same time, we need to have a balance.
All those in favor of HES 21, Environmental Services and Research, $4,918,742 in 2018 and $5,188,000 in 2019, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
And those against, no. The ayes have it. HEA2, Medical Care for Indigents, $10,971,006 in 2018 and $10,971,006 in 2019. Are there any questions? Member for Bodden Town West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just through you, sir. I noticed that one of the measurements for this output is percentage of patients seen in GP within 30 minutes of appointment, percentage of patients seen in SBC within 30 minutes of appointment, and percentage of patients seen in dental clinic within 30 minutes of appointment time. I'm just curious in terms of how the ministry is actually tracking this, I guess, timeliness or this what they're purchasing to make sure that they're actually getting the value for their money.
Mr. Chair, through you, the CEO of the Health Services Authority does provide a monthly report to the ministry that includes a report on waiting times at the various clinics within the Health Services Authority, not specific to the indigent population, but to the clinics themselves.
Mr. Chair, I'm hoping that I'm correct in the line item now to ask the question that I had before, which is there any outstanding lawsuits that needs to be settled or with the HSA within the last 5 to 10 years?
CEO, before you actually answer the question, let me just put it on the record here that we need to be extremely careful because of legal privileges and everything else. So be careful how far you take any questioning with regard to this. I plead for. Thank you. Please proceed.
Lizette Yearwood, Chief Executive Officer of the Health Services Authority. According to the records, we have 5 cases pending, Mr. Chairman, and these are dependent on the outcome of another case that's currently before the courts.
So from a time perspective, through you, Mr. Chair, we won't know whether they'll be resolved until that other matter is resolved. Okay. Mr. Chair, through you, one more question. I think she answered already, but what you're saying is there's no other outstanding matters with the HSA that are not related to waiting on a current matter before the court.
Mr. Chairman, through you, these are the only cases that are currently before the court that is waiting the outcome of another case. There's other matters that might be being pursued, but these are the only cases before the court.
Thank you. Follow-up question through you, Mr. Chair. How many other matters that are not being taken to court but are being pursued in respect to potential lawsuits that you're aware of? Or settlements, either one.
Mr. Chairman, through you, these cases could be in various stages, so it's very difficult to put a number to cases that are being pursued because it could be as simple as a complaint that is being explored. So they're in various stages, so I'm not able to put a number to those matters.
Thank you. Through you again, Mr. Chair, can you explain, and this is my last question in respect to suits and claims, can you explain the process that one has to go through from the start of the complaint to the settlement through HSA in the Attorney General's office in respect to the client or the victim, so to speak? What is the process? So to have an idea of how long this thing takes.
Mr. Chairman, before the CEO answers, this might be pushing a little bit far along the lines of where we are because of some of the pending cases.
Okay, I'm agreeing with you as well. So I'm really asking to pull back and limit these sorts of questions.
Mr. Chair, unless you can, I mean, I don't want to outstep my boundaries, but the last question that I asked was simply what is the normal process in respect to a claim? There are people who are constituents that I am responsible to that I have to ask these questions on behalf in respect to what is the normal process for these types of things. Now, I'm not asking for giving out information that would put the government in a disadvantage, but there has to be a process that the HSA head can give to this committee.
Okay, proceed.
Mr. Chairman, through you, if it's a medical malpractice claim that is being pursued, for example, the individual who alleges that there is a concern can bring the matter to the attention of the Patient Services Committee. The matter will be looked at and investigated fully in-house. We do have various teams that sit down and review matters. We also will be working along with our insurance and our legal counsel. Sometimes we engage expert witnesses to review the case and give us an opinion. And then the matter then is with the courts and with the legal representatives. So that then can take, varying amounts of time.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Through you, sir. The first question I asked regarding the percentage of patients or whatever, and I just want to make so everyone can understand where I'm coming from. I understand that this process and looking at the purchase agreement is what the government is buying from the HSA and what it is that we are approving in this house for the government to spend at the HSA. I am therefore asking what processes or procedures does the ministry have in place to ensure that we're getting value for money and what it is that we're actually buying, as opposed to just relying on what the HSA provides. Because what I'm looking for and what's been missing and we need to get back with regards to the statutory authorities is a level of governance from the ministry. If you look at the purchases agreement on page 392 of the purchases agreement, it is signed by the Honorable Dwayne Seymour, JP, as minister, and also the chairman of the board. So this is what we're buying. And what I want from the ministry is what they're doing or what processes they have in place to ensure that what they say that they're buying is actually what they're getting.
Through you, Mr. Chair. The finance team at the ministry, well, the Health Services Authority outputs, there's basically two different types of outputs that we fund them for. One is for services, and another is basically for their operating subsidies. So for services that a policy decision has been made that we want the Health Services Authority to continue to provide, there's been a decision made to support the gap between what they're able to recoup in terms of patient fees and the cost of providing those services. So the information that the Health Services Authority submits to the ministry in support of their invoices varies by the output, depending on whether it's a for-service output or if it's one of the operating loss subsidy outputs. The Ministry of Finance, or our ministry's finance team, reviews the documentation that the Health Services Authority provides. So one example would be the output for and underinsured children. The Health Services Authority, to support the invoice that they present to the ministry, provides a list of all of the and underinsured children that they have put into this billing, along with a description of the department and the fee that has been charged for that child. And that's the type of supporting documentation that comes to the ministry. The finance team reviews it. If there's any questions, they will go back to the finance team and the CEO at the Health Services Authority and ask for verification if it's required. And as I mentioned earlier, there is a monthly reporting process that the CEO of the HSA provides to the ministry. And we also have quarterly meetings between the minister, myself, the CEO, and the chairman of the board.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman, seeing that some of these KPIs or metrics are like within 30 minutes of appointment, one of the things that it's important that the ministry starts to do or do more of is in terms of getting feedback from the customers or the people that, well, the question is, are the ministry getting feedback from the users or the customers to say, well, this is what we paid for, and can you confirm that this is what you got?
Mr. Chair, through you, the ministry, I know that certainly on an ad hoc basis, the minister and ministry do receive calls and emails if there are concerns from some of the patients. I know the HSA does undertake patient satisfaction surveys on a fairly regular basis, and some of the data that they collect through those surveys is part of the report that they send up to the ministry.
Mr. Chairman, through you, we do assessments in our clinics as well. We have an acute care clinic and also the general practice clinic and the specialist clinic. We are in the position to be able to tell you what the timeliness is in all of the clinics that we currently provide.
Member from Newlands.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to refresh my memory, really, what is the primary reason why this isn't covered by Cineco?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So this output medical care for indigents represents the cost of Health Services Authority care for the Department of Children and Family Services clients who are on what we call the indigent list. The reason that this is it's not covered through Cineco is that we've had a few challenges with trying to insure this population in the past. So the situation that we have right now is that the ministry pays on a fee-for-service basis for the care that is given by the HSA for this population. We also have a contract with Cineco they do an ASO, an administrative services only for us. So Cineco adjudicates the claims from the Health Services Authority for us for this output. We pay Cineco a per member per month access fee for that service. We have looked in the past at whether there are opportunities to put this population as on an insurance plan. One of the challenges is that it fluctuates quite a lot. So on this list will be those who are on long-term poor relief, as well as people who come on and off with temporary periods of unemployment and so on. So the premium rating for it has been a bit of a challenge because of the fluidity of that population. But it is something that we have had some discussions about. It's something that we're actively looking to have some further discussions around to see if there isn't a more cost-effective model that we might be able to identify.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just concerned because to me it's a bit random in terms of what services they receive. No one can predict illness. So, I thought that having insurance coverage would be one way of sort of spreading the risk out a bit more, but.
Okay. All those in favor of HEA2, medical care for indigents, in the amount of $10,971,006 in 2018 and $10,971,006 in 2019, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
And those against, no. The ayes have it. HEA10, ambulance services. HEA 6, medical services in Cayman Brac and Little Cayman. $3,783,158 in 2018 and $3,783,158 in 2019. Are there any questions?
Mr. Chair.
Member from Cayman Brac.
Thank you very much, Mr.
West.
Chairman. First, I'd like to say thank you to Faith Hospital and the staff, including the management, for all the kindness over the last couple months to myself and my family. The Faith Hospital service that's provided in Cayman Brac and Little Cayman, most of that should be covered under a Cineco insurance because there's a high proportion of people who work for government or are indigent. Can you tell me what happens to the actual insurance income? Is this the difference between the income and the expense to run the hospital?
Mr. Chair, through you, just confirming that is what this output represents. It's the difference between the cost of providing those services and the capacity to provide those services and what the HSA is able to recoup through patient fees, whether through Cineco or other insurance companies.
Okay. Thank you. Follow up to that, Mr. Chairman. On page 3,
76 purchase agreements. The outline on the services that we're purchasing is emergency room services 24 hours a day. And I'd like an update in a timely manner. Representation that I've had from constituents is that it's not being able to be delivered because we're short on staff.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, that need was identified after the last sitting of the Finance Committee, and since that time, there has been a doctor who has been approved. We've had another FTE that's been approved that now will provide services to the Faith Hospital after hours. So the emergency room will now be manned by a physician after hours. That is something that was put in the budget for 6 months of the year, and currently it is being funded only for another 6 months of this year. We're in dialogue with the ministry in regards to the additional funding, and that is something that we will have a response to shortly.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So as it stands now, you have funding for 6 months and you're going to go out to hire another doctor?
Currently, we have, through you, Mr. Chairman, we have a physician that is on a 6-month contract, and prior to renewing that contract, we have to have this matter sorted.
So I would assume that you need funding for longer than 6 months. I mean, if you're going to hire a doctor for a permanent position.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, yes, sir, that is what we're discussing.
And you anticipate being successful with that discussion? You look very confident with it.
Mr. Chairman, I think it's better for the minister or the chief officer to add to that. Like I said, we're in dialogue, and it is currently not in this budget, but I don't know whether there's any other means to be able to identify the additional funding.
So, Mr. Chairman, I have total confidence in the team there, that they're doing everything possible to make this a reality. I certainly offer myself and the other minister from Cayman, Bracken, Little Cayman, if we can help some way, we pledge our support to the minister responsible.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to, through you, I'd like to thank the Deputy Premier, and if I can give him any comfort, the CEO, every time we meet, she discuss it, so it will happen within this term, it appears.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Chairman, just let me finish, please. Last question.
Sure.
The other identification in a timeliness way is the dental clinic. The average time for an appointment is somewhere around 3 months. Has that been brought to your attention?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, we have identified a gap in the services in the dental clinic, and I must say that the officers in the dental clinic have been working in order to meet that need. They've been putting in additional services after hours as well as on weekends, and where we only have a part-time dentist in the BRAC, we have someone there that's 3 days a week and shared with Grand Cayman, so they come to Grand Cayman for the other 2 days a week. So what we've been doing is also allowing them to stay in the BRAC for the additional days to try to meet the additional service needs. So that waiting time has come down significantly. But having said that, there still is a need for a full-time dentist in the BRAC. Currently, there's only the part-time that is being funded. And again, that is something that we have been in dialogue with the ministry on as well. And if it's not something that is forthcoming in this budget period, we're hoping in the next budget period, funds will be freed up for that.
Maybe you can package both of those together when you discuss it with the ministry. I just want to make the point that it's not only the elderly population, but it's also the school children as well that only have one place to go in Cayman Brac as far as a dentist. If that service is not there, then it's getting on a plane and coming to Cayman or the States to get the service done. So thank you very much for acknowledging that. Thank you very much for dealing with it.
Member for
Mr.
Georgetown.
Chair, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the head of the HSA, can you say whether if a person has no insurance when they come to the hospital, will they be turned away?
Mr. Chairman, through you, we have a payment policy that's been enforced in the recent couple of years. However, despite that, we do not turn away patients from the HSA. But we require them to pay for services. So the first question that anybody who will come to the HSA that is a non-emergent patient will be asked would be the means to pay. And if the individual doesn't have the means to pay through insurance or cash, then what we will do is we will work with them in order to determine whether or not they have the financial means otherwise. And sometimes this means actually assisting them to get an assessment through the needs assessment unit, because the individual may be unemployed, and that's the reason why they don't have an active insurance or the funds to be able to pay for the services. So what we do, we have various outputs as we're examining today. And these outputs will allow us to put the service on for that specific period, and after that time, from there on, we work with them to have them assessed by the needs assessment unit to determine whether or not they qualify for the indigent coverage. If they fulfill that criteria, they will then be given indigent coverage, whether that's temporary or medium term. And then by the time they come back to the hospital the next time, then they will have an insurance coverage. Because I think it's important to point out as well, it's not just for the services at the HSA why it's important for them to have a means of insurance, because God forbid they need to seek services overseas, then it becomes a very, very tedious process to try to get them covered at that time. So it really does behoove every resident in the Cayman Islands to have some means of health insurance, because you never know when you're going to need it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a follow-up question. So are you saying then a person will be covered in the event that there's an immediate need for services at that time, but as we all know, the process for assessment usually takes 10 to 15 days before approval, and then once you're approved, how long you take before you get the card is another question. So we know if a person comes in for an emergency, I think what you said is you will give them services and the medication that is necessary, because I've had claims from constituents who say the doctor sees them, but it gives them the prescription, they go to the pharmacy, then the pharmacy won't give them the medication. So can you clarify whether they will also get the medication? Because the reason I ask that is I do agree that having an assessment that they can't pay to suggest to them to go to the needs assessment unit in the event of a follow-up outpatient service. But we're talking about if a person needs assistance at that time.
Mr. Chairman, through you, yes, that's correct. If the patient comes in an emergency situation, they are seen. However, there have been times when an individual, for example, is scheduled for a surgery, and the surgery is determined by the clinician to be non-emergent. That's when we will reschedule the surgery to allow them time in order to be able to meet their deductible or copay, whichever it is. Having said that, yes, if the individual comes in and there is an emergency, and the emergency team does prescribe medication for that individual, then we will deem to cover that under an output as well. Having said that, each output has a specific definition that has to be met. So that criteria, once it's met, then we can put the individual on the output while we work with them. And I must say, I must commend our patient services team that is very, very vigilant, along with our patient financial services team. What they do is that they will actually assist the individual complete their paperwork and get them an appointment for the needs assessment unit to try to expedite that process so that it can be done in a timely fashion by the time they come back to the hospital again.
Can you explain through you, Mr. Chair, what that criteria is at that time? If a person is seeing the doctor, they have now left the doctor to walk over to the pharmacy. You're saying that the pharmacist has to do a criteria before they release the medication. Is that what I understand?
Mr. Chairman, through you, what I'm saying is that each one of the outputs have a specific criteria. And if you read the definition of the output, some of them say the individual has to be a Caymanian or a spouse of Caymanian in order to meet that one of the criteria. Another one of the criteria would be an age. There's some of the outputs that would be an age factor if it's an elderly person or a child that is an underage child. So each one of the outputs do have specific criteria that have to be met. Having said that, like I said, if the individual comes in an emergency and the emergency room doctor determines that the medication is necessary for the treatment of that condition, then that would be covered at that time.
Is there any criteria that would stop a person from getting any medication once they've said they can't afford it or they don't have insurance?
Mr. Chairman, through you, again, it's based on emergency. And we do work with them, even if it's not an emergency and they meet the criteria of one of the other outputs, we do try to make sure that they fit under that. I'm not telling you it hasn't happened in the past, but once we have been made aware of it, we have worked with the individual and we've been able to make means for them to get the services and the medication that they need.
Okay, just for the purposes of the record and for my own edification, can you list out the criteria for me, please?
Mr. Chair, I'll allow the CEO to continue with it. For the members' comfort and not to circumvent the hospital practices, but my policy is no one should be denied care. And I think that the HSA knows my stance on that. And I think they've been doing a great job in terms of, I've had personal interactions with the management of the HSA in terms of persons who are unemployed, no insurance, and they've handled it excellent. Taking care of the person and then arranging after the NAU trying to. What we find is some resistance in persons trying to get the necessary documents to be able to get their insurance through NAU. So we need to do as much as possible to educate the public of what is necessary before that time of emergency.
Mr. Chairman, just before she reads the criteria, I'm also aware of a number of people who have been turned away. And what bothers me the most about it is that they will see a doctor, go to the pharmacy. Now, at that point, the doctor has deemed this medication necessary, and they were in the emergency room. So as far as I'm concerned, that's an emergency. In some cases, it's antibiotics. And I know people have called me. Just 2 weeks ago, somebody called me and said, the pharmacist said, no, I can't have my antibiotics. What should I do? And I called around and nobody could tell me what you're saying here now. So I don't think this policy has been communicated well enough to everybody involved. Antibiotics to me means infection. So in my mind, that was a serious enough issue that the person should have gotten it. I understand the limitations and finances and so on, but in those cases, I agree with the minister. We shouldn't be turning people away, especially in those situations. This young man was burning up with fever. And my advice to him at the end of the process was go to the gas station and get some Advil. That's the best I could do for him, the best I could help him that day. He's unemployed, no insurance, and it's happened multiple times.
Mr. Chairman, through you, the idea is not to deny services, but to make sure there's the means to pay, and that's why we work with the individuals. Now, training is something that has to be ongoing because we do have staff that are coming and going, and but there is a process in place that if the individual shows up at the pharmacy and doesn't have the means to pay, sometimes, when the individual will say to them, you have to pay for this medication. Sometimes the individual will turn around and go to their car and get the money and come back. So we have to ensure that the team follow the process in order to recoup the cost. However, they do call the patient services rep or the patient financial services, and it's through them that they will get permission to put the individual on an output so that the individual can then go through the assessment process.
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, that's exactly why I was trying to ask what that process is, so I can have an understanding. Because forgive me for questioning what happens in that process, because the only reason I do so is because of so many horror stories I have heard and many other members in here have heard. I'm glad that the minister has committed to making sure that anybody who comes in for an emergency doesn't get turned away. And I'm quite sure he will relay that down the ranks. But so when a constituent calls me and says, here's what's happening, I can say, here's the process, and I know that the process is happening. Whether I can say to the constituent, well, they have to double check. They're going to ask you for a few documents. Be patient. They want to make sure that they're doing all the checks and balances before they give away government's money by way of medication. I want to know that process so I can educate my constituents. Hence the reason I would like you to outline the process when a person says they don't have insurance in detail or they can't pay for it.
Mr. Chairman, through you, when the individual comes to the hospital and doesn't have the means to pay, that's when we determine whether or not they're Caymanian. That's the first thing, to determine whether they will be able to go on one of the outputs that we have before us today. Then the assessment process that I think the member is referring to is the needs assessment process. That does require a number of pieces of documentation, has to have a proof of whether or not the individual is Caymanian again. They have to have copies of all of their expenditures, their monthly expenditures, as well as any sort of representation from their bank to go through a financial assessment by the needs assessment unit to determine whether or not they fit the criteria for indigent. If they do, then they are given a temporary indigent coverage. Sometimes that could be 2 months, sometimes 3 months, and then they are reassessed after that period of time. But I must say that the needs assessment unit, they worked with us very, very well, and more often than none, they are actually covered by the time they come back into the hospital a second time. So it really is only on that initial presentation to the hospital that we have to put them on an output. And we really have to stick to that because the outputs aren't big enough to be able to provide insurance coverage for the individual.
Thank you so much for the answer. Through you, Mr. Chair, I understand the process for the needs assessment unit because I have to go through it almost every week. That's a secondary part after they've left the hospital because they have to go to the needs assessment unit and do the assessment, and that takes some time. I'm talking about the criteria necessary or any line of questioning that your pharmacy may ask the client to say, well, you're Caymanian, why can't you pay for it? Why don't you have insurance? What kind of questioning do you ask those persons to justify giving them the medication?
Mr. Chairman, through you, it's not the pharmacist or the team in the pharmacy that is going to be asking those questions. The individual has to be referred to the patient services team or the patient financial services team. And that's where they determine whether or not they are a Caymanian, whether they're employed or unemployed, whether they have any other means of being able to pay. And if they're not employed and they don't have means to pay, that's when we give them the medication under the output, pending the response from the needs assessment unit.
Through you, Mr. Chair, how do you determine whether a person is employed at the HSA?
Mr. Chairman, through you, at that point in time, there is no means for us to prove whether they're employed or not employed. We basically have to take their word until the thorough assessment is done by the needs assessment unit.
Through you, Mr. Chair, hence the reason I'm asking about the line of questioning at the time of the emergency to get the medication, not after. When the person just came out of the room, the doctor says, here's what you need in your medication, go to the pharmacist say, I need to ask you a couple of questions to make sure before I can give you this free. From then, not the employment part afterwards, Is the only question they needed to have answered is if they're Caymanian? Is that the only question to prove at that stage?
Mr. Chairman, through you, if I'm understanding the member correctly, the individual is treated in the emergency room, given the initial medication, and then goes to the pharmacy. The pharmacist, all they are asking is whether they have an insurance or the means to pay. We don't expect the pharmacist to go into any other line of questioning at that time. They will then call the patient services representative, and the patient services representative will go through the additional line of questioning to determine whether or not they're a Caymanian, are they employed, and if they don't have the means to pay, they will then place them, they will indicate to the pharmacy which output for them to go on. And again, that output is on a temporary basis. And I must say to the House that if you are aware of any individual who does suffer any hardship, is turned away because someone hasn't followed the process, I would like to know who those individuals are, because there are many times that those individuals are brought to my attention, and I work with the team to be able to resolve the matter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'll make this last two questions because it sounds like I'm asking the same question again, because you're saying that you can't determine whether they're employed, or can you determine whether they're employed at the HSA? Or is it a simple asking, well, are you employed? And then you have to take their word by saying, no, I'm not employed.
Mr. Chairman, through you, I think I have responded to that already. We don't have any way to prove it, but we do ask the question, and we anticipate that the individual will be answering the question truthfully.
Last question, Mr. Chair. So I'm assuming then what you're saying is a person says, I don't have insurance, I don't have means for it. The two questions that your team will ask, not the pharmacy, the next stage will say, are you Caymanian? And they'll prove it by driver's license or voter's ID or what they like. You ask the question, if they're employed, they say no, then they get the medication. That's what I understand.
Mr. Chairman, through you, we will then give them the medication and apply them to one of these outputs that they would be able to receive the service until they get through the other process.
HEA, all those in favor of HEA 6, medical services in Cayman Brac and Little Cayman, $3,783,158 in 2018, $3,783,158 in 2019. Standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
And those against, no. The ayes have it. HEA 10, ambulance services, $2,547,293 in 2018, and $2,547,293 in 2019. Are there any questions? Member Freestad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, in the absence of my good friend, this is the first good friend. Yeah. I have to ask about the ambulance service on the eastern end of the district, because more and more, well, it's a consistent thing of people complaining that the ambulance response time is so slow. I mean, this is not a today thing. And I wonder if we can explain why that is.
Mr. Chairman, through you, there is a need for expansion of the ambulance services in the Eastern Districts. We're in dialogue with the ministry in that regard, and I do anticipate in a future budget it will be identified for us to be able to expand to have another team in the Eastern Districts. In the meantime, we do have a team that is operating out of Northside that does cover the Eastern Districts.
Yeah, but there are times that, Mr. Chairman, that there are no complaints. And during that spell, it seems to be when there is a full complement of ambulances in Georgetown, which adequately covers Georgetown. The times you hear the complaints, it is always coupled with 2 ambulances break down Georgetown, or there's only 1 serving Georgetown West Bay, and the guys had to be serving, coming down and assisting down there. It's not like emergencies where you have a major accident or something in West Bay. It's during periods when they see that, look, I put emphasis on they saying that, that there are insufficient ambulances in Georgetown to service Georgetown. They have to move those. So I'm concerned as to when that is going to get regularized so that the response time up there is within reason.
Mr. Chairman, through you, the ambulances are located in 3 main districts, as the member has said, 1 in Georgetown, 1 in West Bay, and 1 in Northside that operates the eastern districts. We are in the process of upgrading our fleet, and we will be having a new ambulance in the eastern district at the beginning of the year. Having said that, since we only have 3 teams operating the ambulances, even though we may have additional ambulances that we use for backups, unless there's another team, then the response time potentially will still be impacted. That's why we're looking to actually place an additional team in the Bodden Town area, which is one of the fastest growing districts currently, according to the ESO data that we have been analyzing. So that is something that I know that our minister is very supportive of, and hopefully in the next budget process we will see that come to fruition. Having said that, as far as the physical fleet is concerned, you can be reassured that there is one on order to replace the current ambulance in the North Side District, and according to the schedule that I've been given, that should be in place by the beginning of the year.
Is this the second one? Is this the second ambulance that was supposed to replace the one in Northside?
Mr. Chairman, through you, I'm not sure what the question is.
Is this the second one in the last year that was supposed to replace the one in Northside? Did one come already to replace that but was not put there?
Mr. Chairman, through you, yes, there was an ambulance that was identified and has been diverted in the short term for another need. And the one that we have now on order will be coming and should be in place by the beginning of the year.
Oh, these windscreens. Was it sent to come on back? That's the need?
Mr. Chairman, through you, yes, there was a need in the BRAC, and the ambulance was sent there so that we could fulfill that need, because we did have additional ambulances here that could provide the service for the northern districts until the other one could be purchased.
That's the beginning of the year, you said, January. We'll have a new ambulance.
Mr. Chairman, through you, that's correct.
Member from Newlands.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'm aware that there were discussions taking place with a private ambulance service to service the eastern districts. Is that no longer being negotiated? Did that negotiation come to an end?
Mr. Chairman, through you, we were approached by a private ambulance provider to determine whether or not we would engage with them in providing additional services. And it was something that was examined, but it was preferred if we could have provided the additional services. And we are partnering with them in another project where they provide transport services to another facility.
And just going back on the ambulance referred to by the member from Easton, the first one that was diverted, what was the need that it was diverted to address?
Mr. Chairman, through you, we had an incident in the BRAC where there was actually a transport that was in progress, and the vehicle the vehicle broke down on the road with 2 patients, and it was really a situation of safety that we had to address, and therefore that was given priority, again based on the fact that we had additional vehicles here in Grand Cayman that could fill the gap, because we also have better maintenance here in Grand Cayman than they do in the BRAC. So it's something that we felt was a better contingency if we wait and use our current fleet here in Grand Cayman, because in the BRAC we weren't able to rely on that maintenance factor.
So, Mr. Chairman, quickly, I'm sorry, have we repaired the one in Cayman BRAC now then?
Mr. Chairman, through you, that ambulance came down here to get repaired so that we could use it as a backup.
And it's being used on the East End? Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not in the position to be able to say it's being used in East End because East End and Northside had another ambulance in place already.
Oh,
but would be used as a backup facility, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I understand the switching Black Dog from okay. That's what they say about that, right? And same thing. But something like that. Anyway, there are some other issues surrounding the ambulance service. What we call it? Ambulatory service? Ambulance service. How many EMTs we have there now? That do we need more EMTs? Because why, Mr. Chairman? I'm hearing there are a number of Caymanians nowadays that are going overseas and getting qualified, but I don't believe that. I don't know if it is. Obviously, they didn't check with the HSA to see if there was any need, but that they believe that's their calling. That's what they want to do. I can think of at least two, but they're out of work. I think they may have applied and were told that there's no vacancy.
Mr. Chairman, through you, in regards to the number of positions in the EMS service, we have 35 approved full-time positions. One is the EMS manager. There's 11 paramedics, 8 advanced EMTs, and then 15 basic EMTs. And there are currently 3 paramedic vacancies, and recruitment is completed, and we hope to have all of those positions filled by the end of the year. One of them is a Caymanian. And then there are 2 EMT vacancies, and they're expected to be filled by Caymanians by the end of January. I'm not sure if those are the 2 individuals that you're referring to, but we do have 2 Caymanians that will be filling those positions. The EMT positions are positions that we fill with Caymanians, and we actually have the training program that we do locally. We just last year, we finished a training program in the Sister Islands where we trained 6 EMTs. So that is the entry level into the EMS service, and we do hire Caymanians. Like you said, if the individuals has gone overseas and hasn't identified whether or not there's a need up front for them when they come home, we always work them into a vacancy. Now, obviously, if they come home and there's an individual in there who's a non-Caymanian and still has another 6 months in their contract, we work with them until that contract expires, and then we work them into the position.
And Mr. Chairman, thanks. And pardon me if I got those acronyms wrong. I don't know the difference between the EMT and paramedic. All I know is saving lives. And I know they're supposed to be on the ambulances. So I don't know what they were trained in. It may be that they were in EMT and paramedic, 2 different things, but I know one is a young lady. I know that, and I don't know but I don't know the exact designation that they have. So maybe those are the ones. But thanks.
Mr. Chairman. Member from West Bay.
How many people do we have in that section do we have on contract at this time?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have those numbers in front of me right now as far as those that are in contract.
Are they, Mr. Chairman, through you, Can you indicate to us that you could get that to us sometime soon, please? How much people we have that are Cayman and how many that are on contract?
Mr. Chairman, through you, absolutely. We can provide that
Thank you, Mr.
to the
Chairman.
House.
I put the question, all those in favor of HEA 10 ambulance services for $2,547,293 in 2018, $2,547,293 in 2019, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. The ayes have it. HEA 11 services at district health clinics, $2,242,947 in 2018 and $2,242,947 in 2019. Are there any questions? Member Freestead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'm very interested in finding out when the repairs on the East End Clinic will be carried out. Because they've been there since, when was there the minister? Minister Budden? 2012, 13? 14.
Mr. Chairman, through you. Yes, the contract has been agreed with the vendor. If it's the status of the front door extension, the contract has been agreed with the vendor, and the work should be completed by the end of the year.
I should be thankful for small mercies, eh? I am. The other thing is and I will not apologize for the parochial matters that I have to bring up here. I will not apologize for them because this is the area in which I will get them aired. What about the generator that has been the source of much concern for us up there when power go out, and there has been a number of times when that was not working properly.
Mr. Chairman, through you, all of the district clinics now have their own dedicated generator. So I'm not aware of any time in the recent year that the generator has not been functional.
Mr. Chairman, I am aware, well, the clinic was built with a generator, really. That's a long time ago. But there were a number of issues surrounding the generator that it wasn't being maintained as frequent as it should have been. And the last time I toured the clinic with one of the ministers, not this one, there were concerns expressed about the generator. The neighbors were saying it was coming on at the wrong time at night and the likes. So those were supposed to be looked at, and I have not heard anything about that.
Mr. Chairman, through you, that has been rectified for about a year and a half now. We've had brand new generators in every one of the districts, and they are fully functional, and I have not been made aware that they have not been operational.
Thanks for enlightening me. What about the repairs, the other repairs on the building, like the roof that we had some issues with, and the additional parking that we discussed as to getting the handicap parking closer to the door? Is that part of this contract also?
Mr. Chairman, through you, that is something that has not been budgeted, but we are exploring how we can get that done as well. The works on the roof have been repaired. The leak on the roof has been repaired, and that seems to be holding right now. And the additional works in the parking lot that you're aware of have been completed, and that seems to be working.
Yeah, the well seems to be working, but it hasn't been any rain. So I don't know how it's going to work. You know, we'll soon test it when it gets to the rain. Those were the concerns I had. I really need that handicap parking right next to the door, because more and more the older people are saying that those who do drive are saying they have to park out in the parking lot and walk all the way up the incline to get to the clinic. And if we could put 2 spots there, I don't think you'll need many more than that. Mind you, I understand that it can go around the back, but you know, we are human beings, are creatures of habit. And the front is where we go to the clinic. The back is where the staff park. I don't know. But if we could get those handicap parking there.
Mr. Chairman, through you, we have a very good working relationship with the member from East End, and we're in continuous dialogue in regards to the needs of the East End Clinic, and we work very well together, and I do endeavour to continue to explore the possibility of the handicap parking lot.
Other question?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Member for New
I noticed that the funds available in this section are not increasing. But I did hear some discussions, I think maybe it may have just been in the media, but there were plans to improve services at the Bordentown Clinic. How are we going to accomplish that with no additional funding?
Mr. Chair, through you, I'll allow the CEO to answer the latter part of the question, but I can tell you that I campaigned on the expansion of the Bordentown Clinic, not only being the largest district, but the fastest growing, and also the medium point for Northside and East End. And it's either we expand that facility or we build a new one in a nearby area. But it is my intention to do one or the other, and to start that before this term ends. But there is some challenges in terms of the parcel in the current area and the low-lying area, with the flooding and everything else. So there's some reviews being done on this, and the HSA and the ministry knows that this is one of the things that I'm passionate about in trying to achieve. I'll allow the CEO to answer the latter part of the question.
Mr. Chairman, through you, the services that we provide at the district clinic is for any operating deficit. So it is basically a fee for service that we deliver, and any operational deficit, then we will then bill the Ministry of Health through that output. Over the years, we have continued to expand services in Bordentown because it is a fast-growing district. We've put in the dental clinic is there. We also have a visiting OBGYN and visiting pediatrician. So we do have visiting physicians that go there in order to be able to expand the level of services that we have in the eastern districts. And they are very well uptaken, and we will continue to look at the needs of that district and provide the services accordingly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Using that, employing that strategy, then you're going to be limited to only improving service levels, I'm assuming, because you can't build a ministry for capital works. So my difficulty is that because we're a growing district, how are we going to meet the expansion needs that the minister is referring to?
Mr. Chairman, through you, that is something that has not been identified for this budget period, but we're still in discussion for upcoming budget period to be able to expand that facility, and in so doing be able to put in another EMS service in the Bordentown district.
I'll put the question. All those in favor of HEA 11, services at district health clinics, $2,242,947 in 2018 and $2,242,947 in 2019, standing part of the schedule of the bill. Please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. The ayes have it. We've been sitting here for about 3 hours. I'd really like if we could take 5 minutes. Let's have a stretch your feet.
Mr. Chair, if I can request if it potentially could be 10. The reason being is just next door there's a very important job drive going on, and I think it would be great for maybe if one or two of the members could just step next door and show their faces to show support for many young Caymanians who are looking for job opportunities, particularly because it's within government. So if you can allow an extra 5, I would appreciate it.
We'll break for 10 minutes. Thanks.